Hello and welcome to the Unit 5 Section 3 video on describing data. So we've been talking about correlation and how you can create a trend line and all of that kind of stuff to determine what the data is telling us and to be able to make some predictions about it. And we've also talked about positive, negative, and no correlation, which is again described here. Positive correlation, you got data that's generally increasing. Negative correlation, it's generally decreasing. No correlation, you don't have a relationship between the two variables. But we can also talk about it in terms of whether or not we have strong or weak correlation as well. So the first graph above here is giving us a strong positive correlation because you can almost draw a line directly through all of these data points. You won't capture all of them, but they all come fairly close. So you would have a strong positive correlation. If it was perfect, it would be 1. If it was perfectly negative, which second graph here is close to that, then it would be -1. Now, if all the points fall on the line, it would be -1 on the dot. So this is a little bit close to -1, but not quite there. You have the strongest negative correlation at -1. You have strongest positive correlation at +1. And then everything else falls in between, where if you have absolutely no correlation whatsoever, your number would be 0. There's no increase, there's no decrease. Now for the weak positive and weak negative, we have these two graphs that kind of show that as well. So this first graph here, or the fourth one, shows us a weak positive correlation. We can draw a line here, but maybe one of these points will fall on it because remember, you want to split between your trend line points on one side and the other. So we may have one pass through, we may have none pass through, so we have a little bit of a weaker positive correlation. If we were to break it down into moderate and weak, this would be more moderate. If they were spread out a little bit more, but we could still see positive, then I would go weaker. This one would be a little bit on the weaker side, going negative than a moderate. Okay, this one's kind of on the edge between moderate and weak. So there is going to be a little bit of kind of your call on some of them, but things like this top graph, positive, this is certainly a strong correlation. If you were to call that weak, you would be incorrect because that is definitely a strong correlation. So some of them are a little bit more straightforward than others. So let's do a couple of quick examples of that. So for this first one, we're going to estimate what kind of number we have. Well, this is a positive correlation, but is it strong or is it weak? Well, I would say that it would probably be more along the lines of, wouldn't be strong, it'd be more moderate, quite honestly. But if I were to have to pick between strong and weak, I would go strong with this one. So we're going to say that this is a strong correlation. In fact, let's just go ahead and say strong, moderate, or weak for these. So this is a strong positive correlation. This one is weak and there's no correlation. So weak, no. Okay. And then for this one, this is negative, and I would say that this is a strong negative correlation. All right, let's go ahead and roll right into the last little bit of this unit, describing equations of trend lines. So we can use a scatter plot to identify a correlation. If the variables appear correlated, then we're going to find a line of fit. So here we have a positive correlation, we have a negative correlation, and here we have no correlation, just to kind of remind you of the three types. The table here shows the relationship between two variables. We're going to identify the correlation, sketch a line of fit, and find its equation. So to do that, first you plot all the points on the graph, which was done here. And then once they are plotted, you are going to use a straight edge to estimate a trend line. Try to get about the same number on one side as you do on the other. Okay, so this is about as good as our trend line can get. choose 2 points on the trend line to find the equation. So here we're choosing 1, 16, so there's a point there, and 7, 2. So let's see, 7, 2 would be right here. And then we are going to find our slope between those two lines. Your change in y over your change in x, we get a slope of -7/3. And then we use that in point slope form. Choose one of the 2 points you chose, choose your slope, and go ahead and put it in the point slope form to find out what your equation of the line is in y-intercept form or slope-intercept form. So let's see a couple of examples with this. So the scatter plot here, the correlation is, I would say, strong and positive. So let's just go ahead and say positive here. We're going to choose 2 points and the line that find the slope. Okay, so here, I would say here's a good point here at 4, 8. And we've got maybe another point here at 8, 14. So our slope, you can use the equation or we can count it. So here we have 2, 4, 6, a rise of 6, and a run of 1, 2, 3, 4. So 6 over 4. So our 2 points are, first of all, 4, 8, and 8, 14. And our slope is going to be 6 over 4, which is going to be 3/2. And then we can put it into an equation. So let's do that. And I'm just going to do the work up here next to this one. So we have y minus, let's pick one of our 2 points. Let's go with the first one because it's got easier numbers to work with. Equals 3/2 x minus 4. So we have y minus 8 equals 3/2 x. 3 times 4 is 12. Divided by 2 is 6. And then we add 8 to each side. So you have y equals 3/2 x plus 2. So that is the equation of our line. Y equals 3/2 x plus 2. All right, so that pretty much finishes up the unit. There is more that we do in class with using technology to find trend lines and stuff using a TI-84 Plus or Desmos. So we'll handle those items in class, but in terms of the material in this unit, this pretty much sums up the material. By the way, if you want to find a value, say we want to find a certain y value that goes with an x value, you have your equation there. Put in your x value and use that to find your y value. Very much like what we did in the last unit. All right, next unit that's coming up is Unit 6, and that is on systems of equations.